Every day that goes by, we get a little closer to the potential reveal of the Switch successor, with the deadline for the reveal being at the end of Nintendo's fiscal year, which lands in March 2025. Since the beginning of my channel, I always planned to make a dedicated Switch 2 video, but I wanted to wait until we got a little closer. There's still a ton of unknowns for the system, and when you single out the confirmed information, we actually have close to none. Well, I guess that's just what happens when you wait too long to make a video. So yes, the physical details of the Switch 2 and potential specs have leaked, but that doesn't mean we still don't have a lot to talk about. Like I said, there's still very little confirmed information, and while the leaks give us a better picture, pictures only say 1,000 words and this script has nearly 3 times that amount, so take that as you will. So, like I said, our deadline for the reveal lands in March 2025. This sounds like to me that they're giving themselves a sizable buffer, but I don't think they'll wait that long to reveal it. In my last video, I mentioned that I wouldn't be surprised if the Switch 2 followed the same October, January, March schedule the first Switch followed for the soft reveal, presentation, and system launch. Reports say that the Switch 2 is already being manufactured, so we could see that become a reality. Alternatively, if the Switch 2 launches later than expected, I could see a January, March, May schedule. This makes a little bit more sense to me since the Switch has a strong lineup already for this holiday season, and an early reveal may hinder the sales. For the original Switch soft reveal, the Wii U was on its last year with an underwhelming lineup, so the need to announce the next system was much more urgent. On the topic of the soft reveal, I expect it to be another commercial-like video showcasing some of the features and games. Unlike the first Switch, they are introducing a completely new concept, so the approach has to be a little different while also communicating that this is actually a new system. The recent leaks show an extra USB-C port on the top, a bigger screen, and a different way to connect Joy-Cons, so those will probably be the main focal points. For the presentation between the reveal and launch, I expect a completely different type of format. The first time around, Nintendo hosted a live event in Japan that went in-depth on the gimmicks and gave screen time to a handful of guest third-party developers. I don't think the Switch 2 will get the same treatment, as there's no need for a console that generally does the same thing but better. I do, however, think we'll get a direct of the similar scale that talks about the power level jump, clarifying the new features, and announcing games for that first year. This is where Nintendo really needs to sell the Switch user base and reel people in. Overall, the purpose of this is to set the stage with all the juicy details before launch a couple months later. Now, let's talk specifically about the features they'll highlight in this presentation. For starters, we can assume at the very least the Switch 2 can do everything the Switch 1 can, so detachable controllers, cartridges, docking to the TV, all that stuff. I think it's also safe to assume that both physical and digital Switch 1 games will be playable on the Switch 2, as we know based on the leaks, there's also a cartridge slot on the top of the system. As for the new details about the Switch 2, we have a few reports on what may make it feel different. For starters, the power level sounds like it's going to be equivalent to the PS4 while in handheld mode, and the PS4 Pro while docked. Personally, I am more than okay with this. Switch games already nail the visuals, and you can see that with Smash, Mario Kart, Pikmin, and Luigi's Mansion. My hope is that this better hardware will allow Nintendo to consistently reach 1080p and 60 frames per second at the very minimum for every first-party game, with some being able to run at 4K. Now, I'm not trying to say they shouldn't make their games look better, but with how good they can make games look with dated hardware, I think performance should be their #1 goal. Riding off the leaked images, we know that the size of the screen is jumping from the first Switch's 7 inches to 8 inches, making it even bigger than the Steam Deck. This is obviously a welcome upgrade, however, this would mean our current Joy-Cons will not be able to snap onto the Switch 2 due to the bigger size. This is reinforced by the recent reveal of a charging station Nintendo's releasing, giving people a way to charge their first model Joy-Cons while still using them. I could go in depth about the new Joy-Cons, but the leaks already basically show us everything we need to know. The SL and SR buttons are much bigger, there's a capture button on both the left and right Joy-Cons, and lastly the slide-in rail has been retired for a magnetic snap-on with a button that releases them. Now, Nintendo originally planned for the first Switch to have a snap-on mechanism, but they couldn't get it to work, so it's cool to see them come full circle. One big gripe that I have with the Joy-Cons is that they aren't necessarily comfortable to hold. I enjoy playing in handheld mode sometimes, but I really wish the backs of the Joy-Cons were shaped kind of like the Wii U gamepad. Despite being very bulky, the Wii U gamepad felt great to hold, and I'm hoping with the bigger Joy-Con it will feel a little better, but I do wish that they were shaped differently. The last major thing we see on the body of the Switch 2, and let me just say this is a very welcome change, is a USB-C port on the top in addition to the one on the bottom. I always thought that it was really poor design that you couldn't charge the Switch while having the kickstand out, so this just makes sense. It will probably also be used for some other peripherals like a camera or maybe an attachable second screen. So that just about covers what we know from the leaks, but there's still a lot we don't know about everything else that happens when you turn on the system. The Switch has a really bare operating system compared to the 3DS and the Wii U, and that leaves way more to be desired. It's possible the first Switch was rushed out the gate so there wasn't enough time or really desire to create extra features for it. So hopefully we get something more for the Switch too. Something I'd really like to see is a proper companion app. We have a Switch app already, but it's only really used to track in-game stats and voice chat. Ideally, this time around, voice chat would be a native console thing, and the app could be used to download games remotely, check profile stats, and add friends. I'd also like to see Nintendo start a successor to Miiverse, their social platform from the Wii U and 3DS era. This would allow a better place for developers to share posts and players to post videos and screenshots they take in-game, especially since Nintendo has nuked Twitter from the Switch's share feature. In addition to those, I think this is the perfect opportunity to bring back the 3DS's Street Pass feature. If you don't know what Street Pass is, it was a built-in feature that connected players when they walked past or were nearby each other. For every 3DS you came in contact with, the player's Mii would visit your Street Pass plaza and they could be used to progress in different minigames. If you don't know where the Find Me stage in Smash is from, that was one of the Street Pass games. I think this would be a big hit on Switch 2, especially since the first Switch had such a big install base. I feel like a companion app, a social media platform, and Street Pass would all kind of work together to create this Switch 2 social system that would keep the operating system from feeling less isolated and bland. I feel like some of the other DS apps and 3DS apps like Flipnote and PictoChat would be great on Switch 2 eventually, but for starters, the other three for sure. On the topic of the operating system, I feel like one of the biggest weaknesses of the Switch is the eShop. Somehow, this is one of the few things that was better on the Wii U than on the Switch. The eShop is extremely slow and disorganized, even 7 years later. How it hasn't seen any change or upgrade since day one is beyond me, and I hope it's something that they address for the Switch too. Something I'd also like to see added to the eShop is custom menu themes. The Switch settings menu literally has a section for themes, but it's only ever been just dark and light mode. This is another thing from the 3DS that would make the system feel livelier and also basically free money for Nintendo, so I'm not sure why they haven't done it yet. Now, these last couple of features I want to suggest are more on the technical side, but I want to highlight them. The first being a way to play games with two screens again. Now, I'm not saying the Switch needs a second screen for every game. What I mean is that there are some games that would function better or could only exist with a second screen. This would not be a forced feature like it was on the Wii U, and it would just be for developers making games that want to be designed around it. Games like Mario Maker, for example, don't feel as intuitive without being in handheld mode. So I think there's some value in having a feature like this. Not only that, but a second screen functionality would allow Nintendo to remake and port games that are very touch heavy like Kirby and the Rainbow Curse or Nintendogs. If you watched my Nintendo Switch Online video, I detailed a way they could implement this with Bluetooth streaming to the dock from the system. This is just an example of how it would work, but I explain it better in the video. The next technical bit would be to lower the input delay on the Switch. For those who don't know, the Switch has a native input delay, meaning the time from the moment you press the button to when the game responds to that button press is bigger than on every other system. The Switch's concept is so perfect for events like fighting game tournaments and speedrunning, but the several extra frames of delay make it go from super convenient to basically an unviable option. This is also part of the reason why Smash Ultimate feels unresponsive compared to the other Smash games, so I'm really hoping that this is addressed. Now, as far as the name goes, most people refer to the Switch successor as just the Switch 2. It's a great to-the-point name, however, to me at least, it sounds kind of off-brand for Nintendo, and I think they can do better. They do need to be careful though, as they have a history of poorly naming some of their systems. Nintendo's in a position where they need to establish that this is a system with the qualities of the Switch, but also the start of a next generation. Let's assume all the features and specs in the leaks and from what we've talked about make it to the final product. We would be looking at a Switch console with a massive power jump, bigger size, and more features while still being a hybrid. With that in mind, I think the Super Nintendo Switch is an appropriate name. This name rides off the Nintendo Switch brand while also highlighting more power and features. It's a super powered Switch. If you're familiar at all with Nintendo's older systems, they did a similar thing with the NES and the SNES, which is virtually the same name but with Super in front of it. For short, people can also call it Super Switch, as that just rolls off the tongue a lot better. As far as the logo, with the new way the Joy-Cons get attached, the current one would have to be retired, so I cooked up an alternative that would fit better with the new generation. While I have a few versions of this logo with different elements, the final design includes a Joy-Con on either side of the text, with the right Joy-Con attaching from the side instead of sliding down. As far as color goes, it's possible they will just maintain their red and white scheme, but it isn't impossible that they switch it up. Both the PS5 and the Xbox have veered towards white and black branding, so I wouldn't completely rule out that Nintendo does the same or similar. Now, no new console is worth anything without its games, and while Sony may disagree, it's important that Nintendo continues their momentum from this year's lineup with a strong start for the next system. It's still pretty early, and I'd prefer to make a separate video on this when the bigger picture is much more clear, but I am hoping for a good mix of IPs. I still feel a void in my heart that only a 3D Mario game can fill, and there are also a number of games I foresee happening in the Super Switch's first year, so I'm looking forward to having that discussion. I'm still waiting for more details on Pokemon Legends ZA, as I feel like when we get a launch window for that, I can make a more accurate prediction of the 2025 lineup. I do think that the Super Switch's library will be heavily buffed by being backwards compatible. I'm expecting the new eShop will also have every Switch game and NSO app available for download from the get-go. So even if there aren't as many smaller titles in the first year to fill in the gaps between the bigger titles, people buying the system won't feel like there's nothing to play. That being said, I think a number of Switch games will receive day one updates for enhanced performance on the Super Switch. There are definitely a lot of games that would benefit from this extra power, like Thousand Year Door being bumped up to 60 frames per second for example. Games that receive this extra bump that are compatible for both systems could also receive an added visual on their box art, specifying that the game runs on both systems. This would apply to any reprints for older games that receive them, like Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. Speaking of games that play on both systems, much of the PS5's lineup also launched on the PS4 in order not to abandon the install base that they already had. I think Nintendo will do the same at least until holiday 2025, where they release their first exclusive title for the Super Switch. They may continue to make sim games for both systems for another several months after the holiday season, but I think major AAA games will start being exclusive starting at that point. Well, I think we just about covered everything relating to the Switch 2. We still have plenty of time before it launches, but a reveal could be imminent. If there's anything you wanted to add to what I had to say, feel free to discuss it in the comments. I also wanted to shout out my very talented friend HighPoweredKeyz, as he did the animation for my logo mockup and also my intro, so I'll link him in the description in case you wanted to check out some of his work. And with that said, unless of course the Switch 2 games leak before I can get the video done, I'll see you next time.